Okay, any more foal or futurity questions before we move on to MPTs or mare inspections? Now, the mare inspections need to be done for a mare has a foal in order for her foal to be registered. The mare performance test, I highly recommending performance testing your mares when they're young. Some people come back and bring them back later, but you never know. Is that mare going to get injured? Are you going to have to take a year off where it'd be a good time to breed her? It's always great to get that inspection and MPT under your belt, just so it's there. You never know. Maybe at 12 you'll decide to full, breed her, and she has it done when she's 3 or 4. We're all good. So that being said, Eliza, there's a couple of inspections I went to. Like Meg produces a lot of MPT horses every year. She has a training program. And then Eliza had some come through this year that I thought was really interesting. They were sisters, right? They were sisters. So out of the same dam, and both of them had foals, right?
Yes.
And she brought them back for the mare performance test, and she chose to do the riding only and without the jump chute with both these mares. So if Eliza, you'd give us an idea of why you brought these mares back, what your preparation was, why you chose not to jump. I think it was a really good example, and they both did super. They were fabulous mares.
Oh, thank you.
So congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. So, I've done all the options of mare performance tests over the years. I've done the traditional mare performance test. I've gotten premium title through performance. And then this year was the first year that I did the riding only portion. I think that, for a lot of people, properly preparing a mare for the jump chute is very difficult. You have to have the help, you have to have the equipment, you have to have the facility, or you have to send your mare to somewhere that they're going to properly be prepared for the jump chute. And I think that is a little overwhelming for a lot of people who don't dabble in the jumping world. And I think it does a little bit keep people from performance testing their mares because it's just too overwhelming to kind of tackle that whole piece. And I'm lucky that I have a large facility and a lot of help in the equipment, so I can do it. And I've done it. Actually, this is the first year I've ever done the riding only stuff. But it's, I'm a dressage breeder, I'm a dressage farm. So it is difficult, and it's a whole nother aspect of preparing for the mare performance test, especially in horses that are dressage bred and are competing in dressage, and are probably not going to be doing any jumping in the rest of their life. So that was why I chose to do the riding only portion. Most of the mares here, in a perfect world, what I like to do is, because I am a rider and competitor, I like to breed them as 3-year-olds, because I'm mostly too busy to do a ton with my 3-year-olds, like have them out competing, have them in solid work. So I figure if I'm gonna, not have a super productive 3-year-old year under saddle, then if these horses are going to have a baby, that would be a perfect time to do it. So oftentimes what I do is I breed them as 3-year-olds, let them foal as 4-year-olds, and then start their training in earnest after that. And I like that. I like that setup because I feel like it gives them a little bit easier 3-year-old year, and I'm not pushing them. And honestly, given how busy I am and what my setup here is, I don't do a ton of young horse stuff. I mean, I ride a lot of young horses, but I'm not out there competing in a lot of young horse stuff. My horses really are geared toward moving up the levels in dressage. So I don't feel like I'm losing a lot by breeding them as a 3-year-old. So the 2 mares that I presented this year both had foals as 3-year-olds, and then starting after that, they started their dressage careers. And so both of them were not super young, probably 6 and 7, I think they both were. And I prefer actually to have the mare be a little bit older. I mean, obviously, when they're foaling at 4 and they're lactating for 6 months, and oftentimes we will ride them a little bit, but not a lot. So they're not really in solid work until their 5-year-old year. But I have found that I like the mare to be, I know that the mare performance test really is designed for a young mare, but I personally like the mare to be, 5-ish, because I feel like they do a lot better when they can consistently go in at least a first level frame. I mean, they have to be able to lengthen their gaits and stay in balance, bigger trot, bigger canter, canter, trot, canter across the diagonal, that sort of thing. And so what I have done in the past is, when I've tested younger mares, I really didn't feel like they got the scores that I had been hoping, and I felt that they could get, really due to lack of strength, lack of balance, stuff like that. So I personally prefer to mare performance test a mare that's a little bit older. And I think some of the biggest things for bringing a mare back from foaling and then preparing it to do a mare performance test, body work, body work, body work, body work, body work. I can't say that enough. I do a lot of body work on my dressage horses, and it makes a huge difference. And I feel like mares that have had a foal and have, lived the broodmare lifestyle, I do feel that, a lot of times they're out chiropractically and their muscling is a little wonky. And so I do try to really support them with all the different modalities. I mean, I literally do everything, we have MagnaWave, laser, acupuncture, chiro, massage, everything. And that makes all the difference in the world for these mares coming back from having a baby and, trying to get fit again and get their bodies working properly again and getting muscled correctly. Another big thing that I find to be very, very helpful is, especially when preparing for the mare performance test, is to get the mares out of the arena. I do tons and tons of practicing bigger gaits out in the fields. And I feel like a horse out in the fields will kind of open up their stride a little bit more, both in trot and canter, and stay in a little bit better balance than oftentimes they will do in a dressage arena. So that is a huge part of our conditioning to prepare for the mare performance test, is getting them out and just going, big trot, smaller trot, big trot, smaller trot. We do intervals, we do hills, all that sort of stuff. And then when you try to put those bigger gaits together in the ring, it really is a lot easier for them. Another thing that I have found to be very helpful is assigning a number score to the tempo that you're in. So if you're in like your horse's natural working trot, say you could give that a 3. And then say a little bit bigger, kind of toward a medium trot, you could give it a 4. And say a little bit more collected trot, you could give it a 2. And so what I do riding around, either out in the fields or in the arena, doesn't matter. I will say, okay, we're gonna, 3. And then I'll say now 2, now 3, now 4, now 5. And so I can very easily extend and compress that horse back and forth. And it's not just like doing an extended trot and then trying to bring it back really quickly. I think that by assigning a number score to the tempo and the length of stride allows you to go back and forth in a much more elastic way. And so that makes it so that the horse is very comfortable, showing off their gaits and going back and forth and really, achieving what they're asking for in the mare performance test. Another thing is really, I've seen a lot of mare performance tests where people come in and they try to ride it like a traditional dressage test, where the horse is, absolutely going around perfectly and there's no bobbles and everything is very smooth. And of course you want that, but I think that to do well in a mare performance test, you're better off not riding it like you would ride a traditional dressage test, so to speak. I think that it's better off maybe to have not as perfect a rideability score as you might be looking for in a traditional dressage test, as that is one score of the test. And maybe, take a little bit of a risk and, ask for a little bit more in terms of the gaits and expression in the movement. And if maybe it's not quite as smooth and bobble free as a traditional dressage test might have been, that's okay. I mean, these are designed for young horses. They do understand that these horses are not, perfectly on the aids at all times. So I think that you're better off, because there are 3 gait scores in your final score and 1 rideability score. So I do think you're better off pushing the envelope a little bit and, going for a little bit more expression in the gaits rather than having it be absolutely picture perfect and smooth like you would be hoping for a dressage test that maybe doesn't show off the gaits that the horse can do quite as much as if you worked it that way. Another thing is, if it's very much worth it, if you are not, a super experienced rider and you don't feel like you can really show off your horse's gaits, it might be worth it to, find someone who might be able to ride the horse for you at the inspection. Because these are, unlike a regular show, these are scores that stay with the mare for their life. And even if it's not really, important to you in the moment or really matters all that much with what you're trying to do for the career for the horse right then, you never know what's going to happen down the road. And if the mare becomes injured and you want to sell it as a brood mare, having decent mare performance test scores are very important to a lot of breeders, and also really help you sell the horse to a good situation for more money than, scores that maybe aren't as good. So those are really, I think, my key points in what we've done to prepare mares. I will touch on very briefly on the jump shoot, although I did not do it this year. But one thing I have done a lot of mare performance tests. I mean, nothing like Meg and Mo, but I've done a lot of traditional mare performance tests, and I will say that the hands down the most important thing is having them go through the chute with confidence. And so what we have done here over the years is I don't push them because, again, I'm not breeding jumper types, I'm breeding dressage types. So I don't push them all that much in terms of, raising the height when I'm at home preparing. My goal is that I want them super confident through the chute, because a horse that will go through the chute confidently is going to score better than a horse that maybe has more talent but is fried in the chute and is, has been a little bit, lost their confidence through it. And so I figure if my horses get pushed more on the day of the mare performance test and they don't want to jump anymore after that, well, I don't care, because they're not going to jump anymore most likely in their life. But my dressage bred mares have always done quite well through the jump chute, because I've really worked to make sure that they're confident. And a horse that is not confident is not going to show itself well. And so sometimes, we don't, I mean, I'll push them a little bit, because I know that they got to be able to do something. But basically, I'll stop it at home, even though I know they could easily go higher, because I'm like, you know what? They're going through this confidently and comfortably. They're going to raise it up at the inspection, and if they do it, they do it. But if I cause them to, and I have had a horse that lost her confidence right like the day or two before the mare performance test, and we were literally trotting ground poles the day before the mare performance test, and saying Hail Marys and everything. So I really have worked to make sure that they're just at least confident going through it. So.
Well, good. I will say that when we have a mare that's a little bit older, we're going to expect a little bit more from them too than we are from the 3 and 4 year olds. I know Dr. Chrisman used to always tell me that he would give a nod towards future promise on a 3 and 4 year old, which means maybe rounding up a little bit if the younger horse is promising and confident. Whereas if we have an older mare, we're gonna expect them to be a little more solid, just because of the experience. But when we know the mare has maybe been under saddle just a little bit because she's taken a year or two off to have foals, we taken that into account too. So with that being said, Meg has a tendency in her program to run through those 3 and 4 year olds. She likes to get their mare performance tests done when they're young. So it's a little bit different than an older mare with a performance career ahead of them. So Meg, and you do often, almost always run your dressage mares through the jump chute too.
Yeah.
So tell us what
Yeah.
that's all about.
So I agree with a lot what Eliza said about prepping the mares, and a lot of the things that she does, I do with my youngsters. So for me, I try to send my 3 year olds through the performance test, because if they're going to stay with me, they're going to be brood mares. So my brood mares need to give me a foal every year. I mean, they are brood mares. So hopefully, at 3, I breed them before they have their first foal, and hopefully they give me 18 foals after that. So they don't have a chance really to do again a mare performance test. If they're 3 and they're sale horses, so many people um, that the mares get sold to don't do mare performance tests. They don't inspect mares. They go on to be competition mares, or it's just not important to them. So I a lot of times try to hold on to my 3 year olds until I do get them through an inspection and the MPT. And if they're going to be sold in the spring of the year, I try to finagle with the new buyers, like, hey, can it stay here just a little bit longer? Let me inspect them. Let me try to get them through a mare performance test. So, yeah, I'm a big believer in that. But with that said, not every 3 year old can go through. Like, again, you have to evaluate your 3 year olds and to see if they are ready or not. So for me, very generalized, every horse is different. It takes me about 6 months from the time I'm starting groundwork to the time that they're kind of ready to go through the mare performance test. Again, every horse is an individual and you have to treat them as individuals, but usually I can get them prepared in 6 months' time. I agree with Eliza that when they're a little older, they can be stronger. Their gaits can be a little bit more. But as inspectors, we do know that. Like, we know that 3 year olds, we don't expect them to go like 5 and 6 year old and have that strength. But what we do expect is that they're rideable. They have a connection. They know how to go to your hands softly. They can push from behind. They can do a lengthen and shorten a little bit, go from the leg, and they do have some balance. There's 20-meter circles in your mare performance test. We don't really want to see super egg shapes. Like, we like to see round circles and straight lines. So we work our young horses towards that. For me, 20 minutes a day for these young 3 year olds, 4 or 5 days a week. I don't feel like they're stressed or worked too hard. As soon as I have breaks and a little steering on the young horses, they go out in the fields, just like Eliza said. We go out, we do hills, we go forward and back. Just, they're not sandbox type horses in the beginning. So, but usually generalized, you can get them ready. And if you go back and look at scores of 3 and 4 year olds, like compared to these older ones, they're pretty close, you know, for the different awards and whatever. So you can get your 3-year-olds ready. Been doing it a long time. I do in general send my horses through the traditional MPT with the free jumping chute. I do believe that every dressage horse should be able to jump some. I'd hate to be trail riding and they couldn't even step over a log. That would scare me a little bit. So, but I use the free jumping in all of the training here at this farm. The stallion at 20 goes through a free jumping chute once a week, especially in the winter. So I incorporate the free jumping chute once a week in my dressage training, cavaletti work. I just think it's good for them. It gives them something else to do. It makes them stronger, gets them over their back more. So I'm probably a little old fashioned now anymore. I know a lot of people don't do it, but I did have a mare this year that Sandy was talking about that had a foal this year. I bought her from Germany, wasn't MPT'd in Germany, but she was in full, so I weaned her slightly early. I only had 2 months to get her ready. She was started in Europe, but she had a couple foals. So that mare I did not send through the free jumping chute this fall because she was almost 7 months in full. Like that wasn't going to be very fair to her. There was no way she was really going to use her back, or like that's not fair either. So again, you have to know what's right for each one of your mares. I agree with Eliza. You know, when you're doing your mare performance test, go for those big gaits. It's not a dressage test. We like to see nice forward moving horses. But with that said, we're not looking for them to run around, not in a good tempo. We do look for balance, but, you know, go for it. You know, the rideability score is, you know, how does the mare react to your aids? How is she in the contact? So it's not, you know, if you're lengthening and she breaks into a canter and you bring her right back, that's not really that big of a deal in our mare performance test. So yeah, we like the big gaits, horses in balance, happy horses. We don't like seeing them necessarily grinding their teeth or wringing their tail or anything like that. We have seen also occasionally mares that have foals on their side, and ran into it this year that the lady wanted to leave the foal loose when the mare went through the free jumping chute. That's obviously a no-no. You know, foal can get hurt. So you either need to hold your foal while the mare's doing the free jumping or put it in a stall, or but the foal does need to be contained. So just a little heads up, because occasionally we do see them out on tour with foals still on their side. And it's been done successfully, but you have to prep your mare for it and that they're comfortable with that. I think that's it. What else, Sandy?
Does anybody have any questions about, one thing I wanted to say is when, especially as far as rideability goes and frame on a young horse, seeing young horses behind the vertical is such a no-no. I mean, we want to see natural gaits, and I'd much rather see their nose out in front of them than back behind. I mean, not running around. But, you know, these are well-bred horses, and usually when they move, they're in a natural frame that is perfect for the mare performance test on a young horse. When you start bringing them back behind the vertical, then we're going to lose the swing of the gait and the reach of the forehand and that sort of thing. So be very careful about that. It's really disappointing when you see a young horse that's back behind like that. It ruins their score too. So my pet
Sandy,
peeve.
maybe you can touch just a little bit more on that. We do now have 2 versions in the Mare Performance Test. I think
Yeah.
we kind of skipped that piece right at the beginning.
Right. So we do have the traditional mare performance test, where all the mares go through the jump chute, and then they're under saddle, walk, trot, canter, where they get scores for rideability. They get a gait score, which is the average of all 3 scores there, and then a jump chute score. And those 3 scores will be averaged for their final score. So if you have a dressage mare that you don't want to jump, then the jump chute score is eliminated. So they get a rideability score, the 3 gait scores, and those 2 are averaged. Now, if you do that, the mare has to score a higher number, a 7.25 overall, to be considered premium eligible, whereas they do the jump chute, it's a 7.0 for premium eligible. So if you have a dressage bred mare and you're not confident with the jump chute, I'd much rather see a mare not do the jump chute if you're not confident, and we don't want to put any mare in a situation where it's dangerous. They just have to, have better gaits. Basically, they have to have dressage gaits. Now, I do breed some jumpers myself, and I see jumpers out on tour. Sometimes the jumpers get big scores through the chute, but their gaits not so great. So that's what helps them with the average there. If you have a jumper bred that's going to get a really big jump score, and maybe their gaits aren't what a dressage mare would be. That would be one reason why I wouldn't take a jumper bred mare through the riding only portion. They sometimes need that jump score to bump it up there. Does that make sense?
One other thing I just want to add is when you are signing up online for the mare performance test, you have a choice, either the traditional or dressage only. And that's where you make your choice in which one you're going to do. You don't send your mare through the jump chute and it doesn't go well that day and then say to us, somebody did try, oh, I only want to do the dressage portion. Then that doesn't go well with us. So you really need to decide what you're going to do ahead of time. And it's also that we have the correct score sheet, because the score sheets, like Sandy said, are different.
Yeah. And this was the first year, or was this the second year we did the riding only? Was it the second?
Second. Yeah.
But this is the first time I actually saw more of them. And I think that people were well aware, and especially situations where they weren't familiar with the jump chute and they didn't have jumps and they weren't supported. So that is a better option if you're not. We want everyone to be safe through the jump chute, and having an experienced team, sending the horse through, keeping her relaxed, starting with the ground poles, just easy peasy. You want them relaxed over the back. And if you're not able to do that, then maybe the riding only is what you want to do.
And this year
go ahead. Oh, sorry. This also allows more facilities to hold a mare performance test. So that is one thing when you are looking at public inspections and where you may go to do an MPT, double check if you want to do the traditional, that it is a site that's offering the traditional, because we do have some sites that are great for a dressage only MPT, but don't necessarily have the team to run a jump chute or the equipment to run a jump chute.
Yeah, or even jumps. They might not have jumps. So, and that has stopped people in the past from hosting a mare performance test because they didn't have jumps. So.
And this year we saw a lot more mares overall doing a mare performance test. So it's very encouraging. We love to see it when we're out on tour, the mares doing the mare performance test. So keep it up.